In today's session, Brandon Dixon and Rijuta Kapoor will take us through Automate Your Microsoft Sentinel Triage efforts with RiskIQ Threat Intelligence. Brandon is a Principal PM Manager with supporting Microsoft's recent acquisition of RiskIQ. Rijuta is a Senior Program Manager with the Microsoft Sentinel team. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to them. Brandon, Rijuta, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jason, for the introduction. I'm quickly going to share my screen. Is my screen visible, just to make sure?
Yes.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the session for automating your Microsoft Sentinel Triage efforts with RiskIQ Threat Intelligence. As Jason said, today I have my partner, Brandon here, who is from the RiskIQ team. He's working very closely with us on the RiskIQ recent acquisition of Microsoft. So welcome, Brandon.
Thank you.
Thank you. To get started with the agenda, we will first go into just talking about what cyber threat intelligence is. I just want to make sure everybody, all of us on the call, speak the same language. We understand what TI is. So we will just be taking a sneak peek into that. Followed by, we will be understanding how Sentinel allows import of threat intelligence. How do we manage and view threat intelligence in Sentinel? How do we power the analytics? So once you bring in TI into Sentinel, how do you use it for creating incidents, for triage by your SOC? How do you use workbooks to monitor your performance of the TI data, how they're doing, how much data you're getting in, and things like that. Followed by that, Brandon will walk us through the current RiskIQ solution that Sentinel offers in their Content Hub. And the last but not the least, we will be talking about what is the future for RiskIQ TI in the Microsoft security stack. I know there have been lots of interest about what's coming next for RiskIQ and Sentinel, so today's the time to get all those questions answered. So without wasting any time, I'll directly get into what cyber threat intelligence is. So how I like to categorize TI is into three categories, mostly tactical TI, operational TI, and strategic TI. The first bucket is tactical TI. This is more around basic TI like indicators and observables that you can actually use for matching against your logs, your event data, so that you can create incidents and prevent your organization from any kind of cyber attacks. The second bucket, which is operational TI, is more on the richer contextual side. This basically includes things like the tools, the techniques, the TTPs that are utilized for the attacks, and this is mostly utilized for investigation, understanding better about any incident that is raised in your organization and things like that. And the last bucket, that is strategic TI, is more around campaigns or the actor motivations and the intention of the actor, any specific verticals that they're trying to target, whether it's the financial sector or the healthcare sector or the telecom sector. Things like that come under the strategic threat intelligence bucket. So these are the three categories for CTI right now that I want to just focus on. So taking a little deeper into how Sentinel offers threat intelligence, TI is one of those areas which is sprinkled all across the product, starting from data connectors to solutions to analytic rules in Sentinel. Incidents can be created off TI data that you bring in. You can use it for investigation, workbooks, playbooks. So TI, how I generally say TI is not one of those areas which is just standalone by itself, but it lightens every area of the product. So with that being said, I want to directly go into how do you allow bringing in TI into Sentinel? So there are two categories I would say here. One is using our data connectors. Right now, we offer two data connectors in Sentinel. One is called the Threat Intelligence Platforms Connector, which is in public preview right now. And the second one is the Threat Intelligence Taxi Data Connector. That is available for GA. It is available in all clouds, including air-gapped clouds as well. So with the Threat Intelligence Platforms Connector, you can bring in TI from any of your tip products, whether you talk about Threat Connect, whether you talk about Anomaly Threat Stream, you talk about Threat Quotient, you talk about MIST or Palo Alto Mind Meld, and other products like that. For this, we have a proprietary Microsoft API, which is called the Microsoft Graph Security API, that can be utilized to bring in this TI into Sentinel. The second one, which is the Threat Intelligence Taxi Data Connector, is more on an open source standard of STIX Taxi. It is essentially a taxi client that we have built out that can bring in TI from any taxi servers. In a moment, we will take a deeper dive into the Taxi Data Connector. On the other hand, you see there's playbooks. And with playbooks, there are two types of playbooks that you can create. One is obviously you can use the Graph Security API through the playbooks to bring in TI, but there's altogether a different set of TI that you can use, and this is mostly on the enrichment side. And when I say enrichment, I basically mean that this is something where you can use the TI to enrich your incidents. Say there's an incident that was raised in Sentinel by any analytic rule, and what you can do is you can enrich your incident with any of the TI that you have in a third-party location. For example, you want to know what RiskIQ knows about a particular entity in a particular incident. You can easily do that by the enrichment playbooks, and in a minute, Brandon will walk you through that when we move to that portion. So, talking a little deeper about the Taxi Data Connector. So at Sentinel, we, around 2.5 years back, we took a huge bet on STIX Taxi. STIX Taxi is a industry-wide adopted standard for sharing threat intelligence. STIX is the standard, Taxi is the protocol for sharing TI. So what in Sentinel we have built is essentially a taxi client that can connect to any Taxi 2.0 or 2.1 server. We do not support Taxi 1 servers only because there's a lot of difference between the schema of STIX 1 and STIX 2. STIX 1 is a XML based format. STIX 2, on the other hand, is a JSON based format. So we only support STIX 2.0 and 2.1 indicators to be brought in using this connector. We have come a long way in the past 2.5 years. As of now, we have around 12 plus partners who have moved to STIX Taxi to have integrations with Sentinel. These include folks like Anomaly, whether it's Cyber6Gale or Insights, Threat Connect. The ISAC community is extremely interested in offering things over Taxi. Today, FS-ISAC and H-ISAC offer Taxi data connectors, Taxi servers, so that you can use the Taxi data connector in Sentinel to bring in TI using those. So just wanted to call out that Sentinel has taken this bet, and we are continuing to invest in the STIX Taxi space as we go. Now, we've talked a lot about how do you bring in all your TI into Sentinel? The next step, once you bring all this TI, is you want to look at this TI. Where do you do that? In Sentinel, we have created a specific table for bringing in where all your TI shows up. As you know, Sentinel is based off log analytics. There is a table in Sentinel called the Threat Intelligence Indicators table, where all indicators that you bring into Sentinel, whether it's through the TIP data connector or the Taxi data connector, or even using Sentinel, you can create data indicators within the Sentinel UI itself. Everything makes into this one single table. This table has a huge, rich schema. You can add additional information, things like any threat type, the confidence about the indicator itself, the description of the indicator, the name of the indicator, its values, which is basically the observables, where it is coming from, which is basically the source of the indicator, etc. So you can utilize the existing schema that we have created. All the indicators fit into that existing schema that you bring in, and everything shows up in this one singular location. With that being said, the advantages of the table is it's a very rich schema, but what we've also built out within Sentinel is we have built out a first-class UI for you to view and work off your threat intelligence data. I generally try to call this threat intelligence blade. Some people call it threat intelligence menu. Some people say threat intelligence research blade. So it has its synonyms, but this is the threat intelligence menu that shows up under threat management in the Azure Sentinel portal. With that being said, this is the UI, which basically allows you to do a lot of actions with your threat intel data, starting from creation of TI, to deletion, to tagging, to editing, to searching and sorting. So you can use this UX without writing any KQL queries to play around with your threat intelligence data. It is extremely user-friendly. So would highly appreciate if you guys want to go log into Sentinel and try this out. All your TI that makes into Sentinel still shows in this view. So every TI that goes into the TI table also shows up here, irrespective of where it's coming from, whether it's through the tip connector, whether it's through the taxi connector, or using this UI that you create using the add new button. Now that you've brought in all this TI, you're able to view it, you're able to search on it. Great journey. The next step, which is the crux of a SIEM solution, is you want to use this TI to power your analytics so that you can raise alerts and incidents in your SIEM solution, which is Sentinel, to go ahead and allow your SOC to look at those incidents and triage them on a regular basis. So what we have done is we provide 26 out of the box analytic rules that essentially map the TI that you've brought in with any logs that you bring into Microsoft Sentinel. So just an example of one of them is, let's pick up this one. It's TI map domain entity with DNS logs. So what it does is it takes all domain entities that you bring into Sentinel through the TI connectors, or you create them in the TI blade. Any domain entity, irrespective of the source, we pick that up from the TI table and match it against your DNS logs. Similarly, all the other 26 rules span across different TI types like emails, file hashes, IPs, URLs, and across various event types, whether it's AWS logs or Palo Alto logs or syslog or Ceph logs and whatnot. So these are all available for you to use out of the box. They all start with the keyword of TI map. So I would highly recommend that if you're bringing in TI into Sentinel, please go enable these rules so that you can use them to power your analytics so that your SOC can look into any incidents that get created off your TI data, which you already are bringing into the product. Now your analytics are working great, your incidents are getting created, your SOC is able to triage them through the incident triage portal that we have, the incident triage blade that we use. The next step is you want to understand how you can use this TI to monitor and understand what you're bringing in and things like that. So for this, we recommend using a threat intelligence workbook. This is available out of the box as well. It is completely customizable. So you can use the existing template. You can make changes as per your requirements, update them. These workbooks contain visual charts that you can use. So for example, some of the screenshots that I have here is this chart shows you how many indicators you are bringing in, how many of them are URL, how many of them are IPs, how many of them are domains and file hashes and emails and whatnot. And then there's other things that you can see is how many incidents and alerts are getting created off your threat intelligence data. And the last but not the least, the screenshot right here is one of the charts we have added on customer demands from customers like yourselves. This shows you the uniqueness of threat intel data that you bring into Sentinel. Say, just explaining this a little bit, maybe you might be bringing out TI from 10 different sources. Say you're getting some TI from Threat Connect, Anomaly, Reversing Labs, RiskIQ, for example. The end goal for you as a customer is obviously you want to reduce the overlap from these TI sources, right? So this table actually tells you what is the uniqueness of TI that is brought out from from every source that you bring TI from in Sentinel. So this is a great place where you can understand how your TI is coming. Are you purchasing TI from two sources, which might have a lot of overlap, which obviously you don't want. You want to cover more and more TI areas. You want to be monitoring everything out in the world, starting from normal IT intelligence to OT, maybe to dark web, etc. So great chart to use. And this is from customer demand. So I'm pretty sure a lot of customers are using this right now. With that being said, I'll turn over to Brandon to talk about the RiskIQ solution that we offer in Sentinel.
Thanks, Rijuta. Hi, everybody. Just getting a little bit of echo. Rijuta, would you mind muting?
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, so thanks, everybody. I think the last time I was here was probably a little more over a year ago, with the Sentinel team, and we've been working with them since some of the early days of Sentinel. It's been amazing to see how the product has changed over time, and a lot of the feedback that's come from customers and users helping inform the investments that they've made specifically in threat intelligence. Last time we were speaking here, we were a partner. Now we're, in the process of integrating RiskIQ into the Microsoft solution suite, which is incredibly exciting. For those who aren't really as familiar with RiskIQ, we tend to think about intelligence along a spectrum. So the tactical, operational, strategic is something that we also believe in as well, though we break the intelligence up into different styles and buckets. So with RiskIQ, the company was founded on technology in a way to collect data from the internet. So we have an extensive architecture that allows us to crawl the internet, much like Bing or Google or any other web crawler would, giving us the dynamic relationships between websites, what their content looks like, the different infrastructure that they're running, particular software versions and software that might be present. And then we also perform internet scanning on a daily basis, looking for open ports and banners, collecting all that information. And all of that data serves as a foundation for the intelligence that we collect, and that helps inform the types of intelligence you see listed here. So just going one by one, when we talk about attack surface intelligence, this is data that is looking at what your internet-facing assets are that are published to the internet. And the way that we're able to do this is we look for an organization, maybe starting with their domain or their IP address or net block, and then build out using all the data relationships that we've mapped to figure out what assets that company may or may not own, what dependencies they have, and what potential third parties are there. That allows us to be in a position to build an inventory of these assets and then start to overlay the intelligence on top of that. For instance, if a new vulnerability comes out, say targeting a particular VPN concentrator, we can look across the attack surface intelligence of our customers in order to see which ones might be vulnerable, and then debut that information inside of an insight that they can then go in action. Next up in the line is security operation intelligence. This is the one that's going to be most applicable within Sentinel, though we have extended our solution to include all of this data. But security operation intelligence is something that we see as more tactically driven. So when someone's got an incident and they need to understand whether or not they have to escalate it, is it good or is it bad? They need to act quickly. That's where we see this information coming in. We have the ability to see a lot of malicious activity that takes place because of our web crawlers and because of the relationships that we've built with other partners, but also sourcing our own intelligence. What that does is allow us to drive line speed style detection and deliver that information to SIEM, SOAR products like Sentinel and put that to use. And we'll cover an example of that shortly in a couple slides. At the top of the pillar here, we have cyber threat intelligence, which tends to be the most strategic. So this is looking at cyber threat actors. Microsoft in particular uses elements and a combination of other naming conventions to track the different actors that they look at. And one of the things that we're doing right now is taking our existing cyber threat intelligence profiles and mapping those into the nomenclature that Microsoft has. But what these profiles effectively describe is just a summary about the actor, what their TTPs are, their motivations, who they've targeted in the past, and of course, trying to pair that with actionable information. So if someone wants to defend against the actor, they can go deploy those observables or tactical intelligence. For third party, this is very similar to the attack surface intelligence. If we're in a position to understand what your business looks like online, then it stands that we can understand what your third parties look like as well. It's just simply a different organization in the supply chain. And so we're able to apply our view of the attack surface and give that information to our customers so they have a better understanding of where risks might present themselves, especially as it relates to vulnerabilities and the increase of vulnerabilities that we've been seeing over the past year and a half. Finally, and lastly, ending on that vulnerability intelligence, there is a never-ending stream of remote code execution and issues that seem to be plaguing defenders and making our jobs difficult. And the statistics I saw earlier this year showed that early in 2021, we were already surpassing what we had seen previous years, and I would anticipate that 2022 will be no different. And the nature of the vulnerabilities that we're seeing are not, they're targeting ubiquitous technologies, ones that have been deployed across the entire internet. And rather than seeing sometimes targeted attacks, we're seeing both nation state and criminal actors exploit the internet as a whole, vastly changing the response efforts and the criticality when a vulnerability comes out. Knowing what vulnerability it is, what the description is, what the rating, if there's any deep and dark web chatter, is immensely valuable, and that's something that we provide as well. Next slide. So just getting into how do we leverage all of this great intelligence within Microsoft Sentinel, Rijuta had already talked about this notion of a connector. For our case, one of the things that we did behind the scenes was we built a connector. It's not pulling data or log data into Sentinel, but it's a connector that allows us to create logic apps that help create playbooks within the Sentinel ecosystem. And what we've done here is we've put together, we took our APIs, mapped them into this logic app connector so that all of our functionality is exposed into the Microsoft ecosystem. So this not only applies to Microsoft Sentinel, but if you're building logic apps or extending and using that automation elsewhere in the Microsoft ecosystem, you can take advantage of RiskIQ's intelligence in that vein as well. But one of the things that we did was we used that connector as the basis, and we created about 15 different playbooks that run through the different gamuts of the intelligence that we have. Some performing automated triage, which I think is one of the most exciting things that we've done, but also some that expose the raw data that RiskIQ has collected for enrichment purposes, some operational intelligence to help inform reputation-based decisions, and then intel summary generally, which would cover more of the strategic aspects. And what we did with these playbooks is we've put them within a Sentinel solution. So this is available through the Content Hub. It's very easy to install. It's just a couple clicks. And within your tenant, you'll have these playbooks deployed, configured, and ready to go, that you can apply them against the incidents that you have. One of the additional things that we did, because we felt it's important for the intelligence lifecycle, is just extending our platform to be able to include and push information back to Sentinel. So what you'll see in our demonstration later is the playbooks are able to enrich the incidents that we see with useful comments and information, but they also provide links to the RiskIQ platform. And as you're pivoting inside the RiskIQ platform, you'll notice this little button here that says create an alert that uses the same Microsoft Security Graph API that Rijuta had mentioned in her talk. That allows us to create threat indicators inside of Sentinel that then can be used to be deployed within analytics. Next slide. So the major focus when we were coming up with the title was that keyword automation. I think there's a lot of flack that SIEMs get because they create a lot of work and the SOC's never able to keep up, and that's just generating incidents, and I don't have enough time and resources. And so SOAR is obviously a component to automation, but more importantly, trying to leverage the intelligence paired with the SIEM, paired with the SOAR to automatically triage incidents was a big goal in rebooting our solution. So one of the things that you'll notice with the majority of our playbooks is that they work both, they have trigger options for both incident and alert. That's just important just because those two things are different inside the Sentinel ecosystem. With the incident-based trigger, you can actually schedule these to just run automatically. You don't actually have to wait or do anything special with an analytic or have an analytic configured to run the playbook. So what I like about those is that you can conceivably have every single incident get enriched with RiskIQ data and perform this automated incident triage that I'm going to discuss. But essentially what we're doing within this playbook is we're obtaining all the domains and IP address entities from the incident details. And for each of those indicators, we're enriching that against the RiskIQ security operations reputation endpoint. And so the reputation details then come back, and those include a score with a number of reasons that help contribute to the score, ultimately signaling to the analyst whether or not they have something benign, suspicious, or malicious. And one of the things that we did here was we, of course, take the reputation information and all that detail that I just described, and we put it inside of a comment, but we went one step further and we wanted to extend the triaging process of the incident itself. So it's hard to see in these diagrams, but I promise it's available. If you deploy the solution, you can go and edit the playbook and you can see exactly the steps that took place here. Effectively, what we're looking at is a nice no-code editor that's been plugged into the Sentinel ecosystem. And what it allows me to do is put in a little bit of a state machine, if you will. And in this automated triage playbook, one of the things that we're doing is as we go through each of the IPs and domains that we discovered, if any of them is malicious or suspicious, we take note of that. And after the playbook concludes and we've published our comments on each of the incidents, we go one step further by saying, was there any activity that we observed that was suspicious or malicious? And if there was, we go and actually update the incident to elevate the severity. So for suspicious activity that's been detected, we'll classify it as medium. For malicious activity, we'll classify it as high. And then we go and tag the incident with the respective tags as well. It's a small thing, and you might be asking yourself, why does that matter as much? But the beauty of this is if you pair this automated triage playbook with the incident trigger, and you have it run for every single incident, what you're getting out of this is a first pass automation to help prioritize all of the incidents that you might be generating within Sentinel. And not only are you getting that prioritization, when you click into it, you're getting the reason why. And let's step into that in the next slide. And what we'll do here just to illustrate this is we'll look at an example in which we saw Kaseya, which was a managed service provider that was compromised late last year, I believe around the October timeframe. Shortly after that compromise was announced, we noticed that there was fake patches going out for Kaseya customers to get them to update. And in fact, these were Trojanized updates and allowed an attacker to gain access. So one of the things that we did was we built a full demonstration end-to-end within Sentinel all the way to our platform and wanted to illustrate the value of this automated triage. So what you can see on the left-hand side, or on the left graphic, if you will, it says sample triaged alert full. You can notice that the severity is level high, and then at the bottom there is a RiskIQ malicious. We can also see that there's some entities within this incident in particular. So because we detected something malicious, in this particular case, infrastructure associated with the fake Kaseya incident, we went ahead and classified this as high, tagged it accordingly. And if you were an analyst just looking at that, you would immediately see just the color that this would bubble up to the top of the incidents that you had. Now, if you didn't have RiskIQ and we didn't have the comments in place and you saw that, that's obviously cause for concern. And your next logical step would be to look at the actual entities themselves. Well, which one of these contributed to the malicious assessment? How do I actually go through and conduct an investigation? So you'll notice, and I apologize for it being small, but just encourage you to go install the solution. You'll see that the comments include links to our platform and the reasons why in the particular infrastructure that was marked as malicious. In this particular case, it was a domain, status.notify-epay.com was something that we had observed being malicious. And there's links in this particular case to the fake Kaseya article that RiskIQ published. So let's go take a look at that. So if I were an analyst at the SOC 1 level, that automated triage work is probably enough for my job to be completed, and I may be handing this off to someone else, because at this point I'm worried that there is something worthwhile that we need to really prioritize and put some effort behind. But if you know, let's say you're brushing up your skills, you want to go and investigate, you want to take a stab at it, or you're a more senior analyst, you want to extend this investigation further. And some of the questions that you might be asking yourself is, what other infrastructure is related to this fake Kaseya incident? If you're not familiar with that Kaseya was even compromised, just knowing that information becomes immensely valuable. But what you can see in these screenshots here is an article of which we have a description, and then a tab there of public indicators, and then a tab of RiskIQ indicators. And so the description obviously tells you a little bit about the event. The public indicators takes open source intelligence that we were able to glean from the particular reporting, shows them as available entities that are linked. You can start your investigation on those. And then furthermore, there's the RiskIQ indicators. So we have a set of research, our research team basically looking at open source intelligence while also doing their own investigations. They'll go through and add indicators of compromise or observables that they saw that appear to be associated with the actor that the open source intelligence may have missed. And so as a starting point here, we have a description, we have an understanding of other indicators. So if I wanted to, I could take a pause and say, let's go and download these indicators in CSV format, put them as a watch list within Sentinel, and try to get some further detection logic going to ensure that there's no other infrastructure that's been compromised. And then I could also extend my investigation as well. Hey. Apologies here. Next slide. So performing the threat infrastructure analysis would be probably the most advanced technique here. With all those indicators that we have, be it RiskIQ sourced or open source intelligence, derived from that, we want to go and explore the infrastructure further. So we want to see what else is related to this infrastructure. Attacks themselves are always ongoing. Attackers are dynamic. They might continue to register new infrastructure despite their operation being burned. We've seen this several times with, apologies. Okay. One moment here. So if you wanted to continue that investigation, and just starting with the example here, we have at the top left our screen that basically shows the detail of the infrastructure. In this case, we're looking at an IP address. And then below that, we have that arrow that points to the passive DNS resolutions that came back. And so this is further infrastructure that passive DNS is revealing as being associated with the IP address. So if we're looking at actor-controlled infrastructure, then those domains that are being mentioned there, depending on the time frame, might be related to the threat actor activity, even though it wasn't part of the original campaign. At the top right, if we make a pivot off of one of those domains, we're going to get further IP addresses, the past history of how that infrastructure has changed over time, with some contextualized tags as well. And so one of the values that RiskIQ delivers is that within two pivots, we're identifying infrastructure that also appears to be related to the attack, not part of open source intelligence, and is in fact malicious. Going one step further, we can start to look at the dynamic relationships between some of these entities and find other related infrastructure. So in a very short period of time, we're in a position where we can start to understand the actors or adversaries' infrastructure, maybe a little bit more behind their motives, their targeting campaigns, and it puts us in a position to take all of these observables, run them back through our SIEM, and ensure that we are as best detected as possible. Next slide. So the next slide here just shows just enumerating the infrastructure completely from a response perspective. And one of the things that you have, one of the capabilities that we baked into our platform is that as you're performing that infrastructure analysis and you're finding pieces of infrastructure that you think are high fidelity or associated with the adversary, you can go and add them to what we call a project. And so what we're seeing in this screenshot here is just a bunch of indicators that one of our teammates had collected and amassed inside of the single investigation. And very much similar to the article, you can download this information, you can copy the infrastructure, you can reference it via our APIs and thus the connector as well. So you can build playbooks utilizing this data. But what it does is it serves as a summary, if you will, of all the adversary infrastructure, and it's living. Much like the attack might continue going, the infrastructure might change, it might get reused. We will continue to monitor the indicators of compromise that have been put inside this project and alert the original investigator to those changes and make that information available through our APIs as well. And so just to summarize here, starting from the top, we have our automated incident triage within Sentinel. You can trigger this via an incident, so conceivably run it on every incident that's generated. What that does is helps prioritize the incidents that you have if anything is malicious or suspicious. You get a little bit of the story directly in via the comments. You extend your investigation by looking at the articles that we have available to us. And if you want to go as far as investigating, you have the ability to look at the complete threat infrastructure, building out that larger picture and sending that information back to Sentinel.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for the wonderful insights into the RiskIQ solution. So now coming back to talking about the future of RiskIQ and how the RiskIQ data will make into the Microsoft security stack. There have been lots and lots of questions amongst people about how RiskIQ data is going to make into Sentinel or any other security solutions of Microsoft like Defender, etc. So we want to answer some of those questions, starting with Sentinel. So as you know, RiskIQ provides premium threat intelligence. And what at Microsoft we have built within Sentinel is something called the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Matching Analytic. This is an analytic rule that shows up in your analytics blade. And what it essentially does is it matches Microsoft generated TI with your log data. So right now we match against Cephlog, Syslog, and DNS. Very soon we are extending this to more additional log types. Right now we use only domain indicators. We are extending that to IP indicators as well. So we are on a journey to add more TI types and more log sources for matching. The essential part here is that any TI that is being used in this analytic rule is all Microsoft generated and extremely high fidelity. So the plan here is to include RiskIQ's premium TI as part of this analytic rule. So it will be used for matching against your log sources. What this rule essentially does is every time we see a match with RTI with your log data, we actually generate an incident out of it. And when I say we generate an incident, it's not just any incident. We also dynamically assign incident severity to it. So when I say assign severity dynamically, what it means is assume we match it with your firewall logs. If it is blocked traffic by your firewall, you probably care about it, but not as much because your firewall already took care of that. So we will raise a low or medium severity incident. Whereas if it was not blocked by your firewall and it was allowed traffic, then that is a bigger concern for you. The kind of indicators we use in this are extremely high fidelity, starting from nation state indicators to whatnot. So they are super high important in incidents that need your investigation right away. So we do understand the context and apply rules in the backend that understand the context of the log and then go ahead and assign severity to the incident, which helps your SOC in the triage process of understanding which needs their attention first versus what doesn't need their attention right away. So the plan here is to include the RiskIQ Premium TI in this analytic rule. This will be at no additional cost to you guys. You will not require a RiskIQ license to gain the power through this if you are a Sentinel customer. By default, we use RiskIQ TI to match against your log data using this analytic rule. And every time we receive a match, you will get a copy of the indicator, which will show up in your threat intelligence indicators table of log analytics, as well as it'll light up in your threat intelligence blade. So any matched indicator, while your SOC analysts are investigating the incident, they will be able to triage back to the indicator that actually got matched. We will publish it to your TI table. So you would, and your blade, TI blade. So you would be able to go in and look at various contextual information that RiskIQ has about this indicator itself, whether it's the threat type or how confident they are about this TI, or any additional tags, for example, tags that Brandon just showed you can be included as part of that TI as well. With that being said, this is not in the product right now. It is in our future roadmap, but this is coming very soon. So please stay tuned for that one. Now talking a little bit about other Microsoft secure products in the security stack. RiskIQ TI will also be used in other products gradually as we progress in detections as part of built-in functionality. So you would be able to use Microsoft TI and get the benefit of RiskIQ Premium TI in other Microsoft security solutions as well. With that, we come almost to the end of our presentation. There are some links available about accessing RiskIQ in your environment. Brandon, do you want to quickly walk us through what these links provide and what the customers can get out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to access RiskIQ, there's community.riskiq.com that's available to you. And this has a community edition, so you don't have to be an enterprise person. You don't have to supply any credit card information or payment details. You can simply register with a corporate account, and then you'll find yourself, gaining access to some of what we showed today, including the ability to use the API within the Sentinel solution and check that out. There's, of course, limitations to that community usage, but if you are interested in the enterprise trial, we do offer those as well. And then naturally, there's a paid subscription. So I did note earlier in the webinar that we use a connector as part of the Logic App ecosystem. And so I wanted just to show the connector documentation there. What that's going to do is it's going to just show the full range of intelligence and the API structure that we have available. So if you're looking to integrate further, you can use that documentation. If you want to just get your hands dirty right away, though, I would encourage you to take a look at the solution. So that's all documented in detail, from how to deploy it to what the playbooks do. And as you saw within the Sentinel editor, doesn't require any coding experience. You can take a look at a lot of the examples we've put together. Some of them very simple and very easy to understand. Others include a little bit more detail and effort. Feel free to extend those. And as you're going through, if you identify more playbooks or use cases we haven't covered, use the community information available to you, submit a pull request, and let's get that information flowing back to the community at large. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. I would highly recommend going and checking out this solution. The Content Hub is a great place, extremely user-friendly and easy to install the solution. As Brandon mentioned, you really don't need a lot of coding experience. It's at clicks of buttons that you will have the solution deployed in your workspace. So definitely recommend everybody to try that out. On the Sentinel side, if you, I have a blog that I authored recently, which talks about all the TI features in Sentinel and things like that. It has a short link, aka.ms/Sentinel TI blog. Recommend all of you to try that out. It contains most information that we talked about today, so just a good reference point. With that being said, that brings us to the end of our presentation. We are open for any Q&A.
Great. Yeah, the team's been great with answering the questions, but we do have a few that were left unanswered. So the first one is there an easy way to add file hashes without having to specify what hash we are adding each time?
Exactly. So there is obviously an option. The file hash there are two fields in log analytics. One is called the file hash type and one is called the file hash value. The file hash type is not a required field. If you create it using the Sentinel UI, that is when we require that, because we follow a format of a key value pair where it is separated by a colon. So MD5 colon its value, for example, or SHA-256 colon its value. So, but if you bring in through the connector, it is not a required field.
Great. Next question. Is there any code samples on sending threat indicators to Sentinel with expiration date, or a code that can revoke a threat indicator?
Okay, so that's a great question, and I have some good news on that as well. So as you know, in threat intel world, we actually refresh indicators every 14 days. If you want to change the expiration date on any of your TI, you can actually do that because we support editing of third-party indicators as of now. If you want to do it for bulk actions, that's not available today in the product, but it is in our roadmap coming pretty soon, within the next 6 months, where we will be delivering a capability by which you can automatically assign expiration dates to all indicators in Sentinel using automated rules.
Great. Next one. Are there plans to add official support for MISP?
For MISP, we already have support right now. So you can actually bring in TI indicators from MISP. For that, you will have to utilize the Graph Security API. And there is also, you will have, which will essentially use the Microsoft Graph Security API and use the tip data connector to push TI from MISP to Graph Security API, and from Graph Security API, it makes them to Sentinel. So you can actually leverage that. There are multiple blogs as well on our tech community that you can reference.
Great. Next one. Does RiskIQ provide threat intelligence feed by itself and not just the platform?
Brandon, do you want to take that one?
Yep, I'll take it. Today, our feeds are integrated with the platform. To the best of my knowledge, there's no intention for us to have just a standalone feed. We'll continue to have the UI, which will include, the API or having a way to get at the data from programmatic means. But I think that's something that we need to discuss for our roadmap and figure out what's best based on customer demand. So if that's something that you do wish to see from RiskIQ, I would encourage you to just get in contact with your representative and just let them know that's an important feature, and that's something that helps us prioritize the work that we're doing.
Great.
In relation to what Brandon is saying, I have also pasted a link to our private community. That's where we actually share roadmaps and features, and you can sign up for that.
Great. Anything that you guys have feedback about how you want to see RiskIQ integrated well with Sentinel or any other products, any roadmap suggestions for RiskIQ, we are definitely happy to take that, both for Sentinel as well as RiskIQ. So.
Great. Thank you. Next question. Will ingestion of this threat data be considered billable within Sentinel/log analytics?
Yes. There is a cost to ingesting TI data in Sentinel, although the cost is extremely minimal. When I say minimal, we are looking at around $2.34 for a million indicators. So it's essentially peanuts, but yes, there is a cost that's associated with the ingestion for TI.
Great. Next one. Can we connect Oracle database to Sentinel directly, or do we need Defender for Endpoint first and just then connect to Sentinel?
For the Oracle database, I would highly recommend you to try to build playbooks out of it first, and any TI that you have in any third-party source, what I would recommend doing is creating a logic app playbook, which essentially can bring in TI from any third-party source if they have like an API or if they have a way to connect. I'm not 100% sure if we have an out-of-the-box connector for Oracle, but what I would recommend is trying to build that playbook out, which will essentially bring TI from any third-party source, and then use the Graph Security API that Microsoft has to push it into Sentinel. This is an exact similar logic that you would see in a lot of our playbooks that we have published out of the box by our partners. Like RiskIQ has a couple of playbooks that you saw. We have playbooks from Recorded Future. There's a COVID-19 playbook that is available that you can reference. So it will all be under the same umbrella, similar looking playbooks. The source just changes. So I would highly recommend building those playbooks for your instance if you want to get TI from things like Oracle or any third-party source.
Great, thank you. Next question. When do we need to connect an on-premise device to Sentinel through Defender for Endpoint, and when can we connect directly using agents?
So that would probably be a question for the Defender folks. I would probably recommend you posting that question on the private preview channel, just so that the private preview community, so that one of the folks from the Defender team or the team who owns that takes that up.
Okay, thank you. Next one. When we deploy Content Hub solutions, do they override existing connector settings?
No, so how the solutions work in right now is the plan at the end is to transition every single data connector that exists today into a solution. So it won't be possible. Your existing solutions and existing data connectors will not be disrupted. There will be a seamless transition process that our Content Hub team is going to lead in transitioning all data connectors in form of a solution, but they would not override all your existing connectors, so you will not have to go reconfigure them all over again.
Perfect, thank you. Next question. Was there a clear summary on what's free, what comes with an existing RiskIQ subscription, and what pricing will look like whenever things are fully integrated? I understood some things were free, but I'm quite unclear what isn't and whether there is anything in between free and a full RiskIQ subscription.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would encourage you to go to the RiskIQ website, which is still active and up. That'll give a breakdown of the difference between our community levels and the enterprise. But in just a brief summary, from a community perspective, we strongly encourage using corporate identities, so email accounts that are not Gmail, Hotmail, whatever the case might be there. And in doing so, I believe you'll get access to a couple weeks of history. I think there's like 15 queries a day, and you'll see most of our data sets. You will not see things like the vulnerability intelligence, the cyber threat intelligence, but you will see articles that we have available, both combination of open source and research that RiskIQ's created. You'll be able to perform the threat infrastructure analysis like I noted, and then the APIs will, you'll be able to do projects as well, and then you'll be able to take the API keys that are available to you within that portal and then apply them within Sentinel. For the enterprise accounts, it just comes with more querying capacity, and then we break the intelligence into modules. The future state of the product, we're going to be simplifying it greatly. So the ideal situation is just buying one enterprise kind of style license, not having to buy any particular module. But we are still in the process of just kind of figuring that out on our end. And that'll be something that we debut when we're ready to go GA, which will happen this year.
Great, thanks. Next question. Does the RiskIQ and XDR/SIEM service provide a way to track whether zero trust security initiatives are having a positive impact or not? What metrics might it base that on?
I can't speak to the ability to track this within Sentinel, but I can state that beyond our threat intelligence solutions, we did talk about the external attack surface management briefly. So looking at how a business has assets that are on the internet that might be vulnerable to some sort of risk or exposure, there is the option for us to be able to detect zero trust technologies and in the presence of them and help give some ROI, if you will, on how well they're doing or how well that's reduced the risk and exposure. It would be a separate product for us, in the course of this, but at present today, our EASM solution does have a valid connector with Sentinel. And so if you were a RiskIQ subscriber in which we had mapped out your attack surface, you could access that inventory and the technology that we've identified, along with the insights that quantify risk and exposure directly within Sentinel playbooks. So you could conceivably automate some elements of that and stitch together your own logic.
Great. Last question. I'm just wondering why Microsoft didn't implement RiskIQ incident enrichment feature natively without any logic app configuration.
Great question. So we just want to inform that is also a feature in our roadmap. Obviously, we just finished our merger and acquisition, so we are working to now natively include the incident enrichment in the incident portal with the RiskIQ data, but that's just something down the line instead of using comments that happened right now. Brandon, do you want to add something to that?
No, other than, I wish there was a magic wand I could wave and immediately have these things work. It would certainly make our lives easier. But I think one of the things I'll state just for, everyone's benefit is that Microsoft has a very large commitment to security and privacy and a lot of promises that are made as part of their enterprise service offering. And as a result, with RiskIQ, we of course take great security practices, and we've ran a company for the past, over a decade. But in joining, Microsoft, we have to make sure that our architecture, our privacy practices, our security practices, everything that Microsoft makes a commitment to in their promises to you, the customer, are something that we subscribe to as well. And that's a lot of the work that's currently taking place to get our solutions over to Microsoft. And the benefit is once that work is completed, not only will we have a solution that largely looks and feels the same, but it will allow us to move a lot faster in creating more native integrations with the products, a la Sentinel or Defender for Cloud.
Yeah, it's just work in progress and it's coming pretty soon. So stay tuned. We're all working day and night to get that possible.
Great. Thank you, Brandon and Rijuta, for being our guests today and for an excellent presentation. And thank you to the rest of the team who helped answer questions. At the same time, I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to visit our landing page at aka.ms/securitycommunity. And while there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content relevant to our security products and their communities. A good start would be browsing our bite-sized product videos, ninja trainings, recordings of past webinars, GitHub communities, and more. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. Please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. Thank you and see you next time. Goodbye.